He revolutionized the fast food business, and some would say he was as much responsible as anyone for the poor diet many Americans eat today. Ray Kroc was the ultimate competitor. He was a man who once said this about his rivals, quote, "If they were drowning to death, I'd put a hose in their mouths." The sun never sets on the Golden Arches. From Buenos Aires to Beijing, McDonald's is the most recognized brand in the world. The man behind it all is not a smiley-faced clown named Ronald, but a sharply dressed salesman named Ray Kroc. Kroc helped sell the world on the concept of fast food and made himself a McMillionaire. Raymond Albert Kroc was born in Chicago in 1902. His father, Louis, earned a modest living working for Western Union, while his mother, Rose, made extra money giving piano lessons. Ray was soon joined by a younger brother named Bob and a little sister named Lorraine. In 1905, the Krocs moved to this house in Oak Park, a western suburb of Chicago. Here, Rose ran a tight ship, and with the help of her children, made sure the house remained spotless.
My mother, every Saturday and often during the week, would scrub the kitchen floor, and this was usually on hands and knees. And after they finished scrubbing, they'd put newspapers down to walk on so we wouldn't leave any footprints.
By the time he was a teenager, Ray had no patience for school. Instead of studying, he spent much of his time thinking up new schemes to make money.
He wasn't bound by normal constraints in his head. He would do things, as a kid and as a teenager, sidewalk juice markets. No one's going to come and buy that. Well, no, I'll do it. I'll market it. I'll put a sign up. And he wouldn't take no for an answer. If he had an idea, there was a way to make that idea a reality.
One place that Ray's dreams ran wild was the stadium that would become Wrigley Field. Kroc himself was a pitcher for his school baseball team, and he spent many summer afternoons dreaming about life in the big leagues. But Ray soon realized that his fastball wasn't going to make him rich. He felt the same way about his schoolwork. By his sophomore year, Ray was looking for an excuse to quit, and found it when America entered World War I. He was too young to join the Army, but he sold his parents on letting him join the Red Cross Ambulance Corps.
Well, he was almost 16, and my parents didn't want him to join up. But, well, he wanted to do what other fellows were doing, and he didn't like school.
Kroc headed to Connecticut to train with the Red Cross's Company A. But the war ended just before he could ship out for France. He returned home, and at his parents' urging, gave school one more chance. He lasted one semester before quitting for good in 1919. That summer, he took a job at the resort area of Paw Paw Lake, Michigan. There, he met a young woman named Ethel Fleming. The two hit it off and began dating. After 3 years, Ray thought it would be a good idea if they got married. His father felt differently. Since Ray and Ethel were both still minors, he refused to grant his permission until his son was steadily employed. Now, to appease his father, Ray found work within a few days, selling Lily brand paper cups. From his first day on the job, Ray was a natural.
Ray was a born salesman. He was quite a talker when he got going, especially if he wanted to sell something.
But Ray was more than talk. He was young, ambitious, and willing to work hard for long hours. He also understood the power of a good first impression and was absolutely meticulous about his personal appearance.
He was a clean freak, very, very spit and polish image. The brill cream in the hair, perfectly starched shirt with a tie perfectly tied, manicured nails.
Ray's squeaky clean image helped him sell paper cups to everyone from Italian ice street vendors to the concessionaire at his beloved Wrigley Field. Then he found the client that would make him a top salesman in his company, the drugstore soda fountain. In the 1930s, bustling soda fountains could be found in every city across the country.
You could go in and get a Green River or a Hoboken or a Black Cow or a Cherry Coke or whatever you wanted. And the fact is that the soda fountain, even before the beginning of this century, was a place where you could go for not a meal, but a snack. Something quick, something easy, something refreshing. It was easy in, easy out.
Ray convinced soda fountain owners that they could get customers in and out even quicker with his paper cups. He showed them how they could increase profits by selling drinks to go. When he signed a contract with Walgreens, the largest drugstore chain in the Midwest, Ray Kroc became the star salesman in his company. Kroc sold paper cups for 16 years. His commissions provided a nice lifestyle for his wife Ethel and their daughter Marilyn, who was born in 1924. But the money came at the expense of his relationship with his family. Work was everything to Ray. He spent countless hours with his customers, learning everything he could about what worked and what didn't work in the food industry.
I made up my mind that if I ever got into the food business, I would do what this one was doing or what that one was doing, and I wouldn't do what that other one was doing. And I got so that I could assess values.
In 1939, Kroc saw value in a new device one of his customers had built, a 5-spindled milkshake machine called the multi-mixer. Kroc knew immediately that a machine capable of making 5 milkshakes at a time was a big improvement over the single-spindled machines that most soda fountains were using. At 37, Kroc left a successful career in the paper cup business and became the multi-mixer's exclusive distributor.
Ray made a lot of money selling multi-mixers. I think in the late 40s or around 1950, he was making about $25,000 a year, which was a lot of money in those days.
But as Ray approached his 50th birthday, his business began to slow down. By the early 1950s, suburbs began blanketing the American landscape, and the exodus from the cities was on. Many neighborhood soda fountains were forced to close up shop. Ray was losing customers by the dozen, but one small restaurant in San Bernadino, California, kept ordering more machines. Kroc had to see for himself the type of place that needed to churn out up to 40 milkshakes at a time. In 1954, he flew to California and met the two brothers who would change his life, Dick and Mac McDonald. In the late 1920s, while Ray Kroc was selling paper cups around Chicago, two brothers from New Hampshire were heading out west to California. Richard and Maurice McDonald, or Dick and Mac as friends and family called them, were off to seek their fortune.
I said, I've decided I'm going to be a millionaire, I says, when I'm 50. So, geez, my brother looked at me, no kidding. He says, how much have you got right now? I says, about $8.50. He says, Richard, you've got a little way to go, my friend.
The two brothers spent a few years pushing sets around a Hollywood movie studio before opening their own theater in the early 1930s. But it soon became clear that showing movies was not going to fulfill Dick's lofty financial goals. Eventually, the brothers noticed that the hot dog stand on the corner of their street seemed to be the only thriving business in the area. In 1937, they took a cue from their successful neighbor and opened their own small hot dog stand a few towns away. 3 years later, they moved to San Bernadino, California, and opened a larger drive-in restaurant, complete with car hops, called McDonald's. Like most other drive-ins that were popping up on the West Coast, it was an immediate success. Californians delighted in getting full menu service without ever leaving their beloved automobiles. For 8 years, Dick and Mac ran the most successful drive-in in town. But in the late 1940s, the McDonald brothers sensed a change in their customers. After World War II, Americans began to look at the world in a whole new way.
After the war, there was this sense that we worked hard, we fought, we won this war. Now the good life is ours. It is owed to us. And by definition, that good life involves speed of all kinds. Speed in fast cars with tail fins that look like they could fly, and speed in terms of getting what you want when you wanted it.
We were kind of getting into an age of jet propulsion, and this was really a horse and buggy operation. So we knew we had to do something to speed things up.
The McDonald's closed their successful drive-in and set out to reinvent the restaurant business. What they created was a kitchen that operated with the efficiency of a Henry Ford assembly line. They cut their menu from 25 items down to 9: hamburgers, cheeseburgers, milkshakes, French fries, and drinks. They sped up service by designing new equipment like bigger grills and condiment dispensers that allowed them to prepare each and every burger the very same way. Most importantly, they changed over from car hop service to self-service.
When people found out what we were going to do, they thought we had gone insane. Because we had a great business. We had the most popular drive-in in town, and people couldn't understand. They said, my God, the McDonald Brothers, I think that they're losing their minds.
But they weren't losing their minds. They were simply pioneering the greatest revolution in American restaurant history: fast food. The McDonald brothers cut serving time down from 20 minutes to 30 seconds. To do that, they broke almost every rule in the business.
I mean, the point of going out to a restaurant was you could have steak, you could have shrimp, you could have fish, you could have chicken. The idea of going to a place that had a hamburger, and if you don't like that, you could have a hamburger, and if you don't like that, you could have a hamburger. In a way, it defies logic, but that's sometimes what great genius is. It defies logic.
The McDonald's genius revealed itself at the cash register. Sales shot up 40% in 3 years. In 1952, their small hamburger stand in San Bernadino made the cover of American Restaurant magazine. Pretty soon, everyone wanted to know how they did it. Over the next few years, people in the food industry came from all over the country to check out the McDonald Brothers operation. One visitor had been preparing his whole life for just such an opportunity. Ray Kroc.
He saw the reaction of the public. He had to see young families there. It wasn't a teenage place. Drive-ins then were teenage places, kind of hangouts. None of that. And so I wasn't there, but I'm confident that the potential on the consumer side, he saw it. Bingo, he saw it.
Kroc was 52 years old. He had seen thousands of restaurants before, but nothing like this. He calculated the financial rewards possible with hundreds of McDonald's across the country, each of them equipped with 8 multi-mixers. But when he discussed the idea with Dick and Mac, they told him they weren't interested in doing it themselves.
Well, I said, why don't you get somebody to do it? They said, well, we don't know anybody who want to do it. I said, well, how about me? He said, do you want to bother with it? I said, sure. And I thought, oh boy, what a cozy way to sell multi-mixes.
Kroc signed a contract that gave him the exclusive right to sell the McDonald Brothers method. But when he returned to suburban Chicago to open his first McDonald's, he was in for a surprise. The McDonald Brothers neglected to tell him that they had previously licensed this part of Illinois to another company. Before Ray could start doing business, he had to buy out the competing contract for $25,000. Already deeply in debt from building his restaurant, Kroc could barely afford this expense. It was the first of many problems between Ray and the brothers McDonald. By the mid-50s, America was moving out to the suburbs, and Ray Kroc was only too happy to follow. In April of 1955, Kroc opened his first McDonald's restaurant in the Chicago suburb of Des Plaines. 2 shining golden arches and a brightly colored neon sign caught everyone's attention. The red and white tiled building was spotless inside and out, and Ray made sure it stayed that way.
If there was one thing that Ray was fanatical about, it was absolute cleanliness. Here was a man who in his now mid-50s or early 50s would spend his Saturdays scrubbing the sidewalk, sometimes with a little brush to get gum off the sidewalk.
One Saturday I came into the Des Plaines McDonald's, and Ray was in the back sink, and he had the mop wringer up in the sink, and he brought an old toothbrush from home. And he was literally scrubbing the corners and the crevices of this mop wringer.
Ray knew the Des Plaines store had to be perfect because it was the showcase he would use to sell McDonald's franchises to the rest of the country. For each franchise he sold, he would collect 1.9% of the operator's gross sales. From that, he would give Dick and Mac half of 1%. Kroc sold 18 franchises his first year in business, but he was shocked to learn that he was barely earning enough to cover his expenses.
He was so anxious to get into the business with the McDonald Brothers. He basically gave them a deal that they couldn't refuse. Unfortunately, he gave them a deal on which he couldn't make any money until he met Harry Sonneborn, who showed him how to make money not on selling hamburgers, but real estate.
Sonneborn was the financial genius behind early McDonald's. Under his plan, Kroc set up a separate corporation that would purchase or lease the land on which all McDonald's restaurants would be located. Franchisees would then have to pay him a set monthly rental or a percentage of their sales, whichever was greater.
That put Ray's interest in absolute parallel with his own franchisee's interest. Franchisee was motivated to sell more, and Ray only made his money when the franchisee sold more. So The concept of renting real estate to franchisees was absolutely critical to the success of McDonald's in every respect.
With his real estate formula in place, Kroc set out to meet his goal of opening 1,000 McDonald's from coast to coast. His search for new locations was endless. Ray was in his mid-50s and spending more time away from home than ever before. This took a terrible toll on his marriage. Kroc's relationship with Ethel had been rocky for years when, in 1957, he fell in love with another woman, Joan Smith.
I was there with Ray the night that we had dinner at the Criterion restaurant, owned by Jim Zion, who had the Minneapolis McDonald franchise. And there's this cute blonde playing the organ-piano combination, whose name was Joni, and I never believed in love at first sight, but he was smitten. And, you know, I may have seen a spark in her eye, too, I don't know.
In 1961, Kroc ended his 39-year marriage with Ethel and launched a full-scale effort to win over Joan. But Joan decided she couldn't leave her husband.
If Ray could ever be called devastated, it's probably not the right word because he wasn't the type of guy who'd get devastated, but he was heartbroken. But it didn't last long.
1 year later, Ray moved to California and met a woman named Jane Dobbins Green. After just 2 weeks of dating, he married her. He later admitted that he married Jane out of convenience and that his heart was still with Joan. But Kroc's first love was always McDonald's. From 1958 to 1961, he opened over 200 new restaurants and showed no signs of slowing. Ray and his staff would scout new locations by flying over communities in the company plane looking for church steeples. Ray believed that where there were churches, there were good American families. And that's who he wanted as customers.
That becomes his method for locating his restaurants very early on. Just very gutsy, very intuitive. Now forget the scientific and the quantitative studies, just very intuitive. And once Kroc has that restaurant there, he tells the franchisee, this is how you need to operate. This is the McDonald's system that you're franchising.
Kroc and company developed a 75-page manual that outlined every aspect of running a McDonald's operation. Nothing was left to interpretation. Burgers had to be exactly 1.6 ounces, served with a 1/4 ounce of onion, a teaspoon of mustard, and a tablespoon of ketchup. Fries had to be cut at 9/32 of an inch thick. The manual even specified how often the restaurant needed to be cleaned. Ray wanted perfection and had no tolerance for variations by local operators.
You can't give them an inch. The organization cannot trust the individual. The individual must trust the organization. Any other way would be building on a marshy foundation that could collapse at any time.
Ray Kroc was successful because he had a formula. And as soon as you have somebody monkeying with that formula, that, I think, to Ray Kroc would be the equivalent of somebody on the Ford assembly line saying, well, I think I'll put this mirror on the car a little bit differently.
In 1961, Ray Kroc and his staff came up with a way to exercise even more control over their franchisees. In the basement of a McDonald's unit outside Chicago, they opened a training center that would eventually become Hamburger University, where students earned their degree in hamburgerology and minored in fries.
The significance of Hamburger University was to make sure people did it his way. It was like going into the Army. It was like getting a GI-issued book of how to clean your rifle, how to make your bed. This was not, McDonald's was not a place for novelty and invention.
Kroc insisted that operators stick to his ironclad rules, but Ray was a rule breaker himself. He continually clashed with Dick and Mac over changes he wanted to make in their original formula. But contractually, he couldn't change anything without their written approval. This became an increasing source of frustration for Ray during his 7-year relationship with the McDonald brothers.
There was a little friction began to build up because Ray thought we had too much control on him. See, Ray was a great idea man, and he'd have one probably every 15 minutes. But some of them were not gems. So they began to have a little friction.
In 1961, Kroc decided he wanted McDonald's all to himself. He asked Dick and Mac how much it would cost to buy them out. The brothers told him they wanted $1 million each, plus enough money to cover their taxes, a total of $2.7 million. Cash.
He thought, here are these guys, they weren't doing anything to earn their cut, except they gave me the idea. And now they wanted all of this money, and they wanted it in cash. I think he almost thought it was like an extortion.
I learned some new cuss words, and I broke a few windows, and I shut the door and screamed and hollered, and I said, take it. And the lawyer and accountant said, you're crazy, and I said, that was established many years ago.
But the deal had one last stumbling block. Kroc thought the $2.7 million included the brothers' original San Bernadino restaurant. Dick and Mac said it did not. This disagreement capped off years of Ray's long-simmering resentment toward the McDonald brothers. He confided to a longtime employee, "I'm not normally a vindictive man, but this time I'm going to get those sons of bitches." And he would use their own name to do it. In December of 1961, Ray Kroc bought the rights to the McDonald Brothers formula for $2.7 million. Without the rights to their own name, Dick and Mac were forced to take down the sign above their San Bernadino restaurant and rename it the Big M. Fueled by years of frustration and anger, Kroc opened a brand new McDonald's 1 block away and drove the Big M out of business.
Kroc could be very vindictive, and he was proud of it. He considered that kind of the mark of a good salesman, that you have to be that forceful and aggressive, vindictive person. So he didn't consider that a personal flaw at all.
With Dick and Mac out of the way, Kroc set out to put his own stamp on McDonald's menu. He fancied himself a visionary when it came to developing new products, but it was never his strongest suit.
I remember one time he tried to put in McDonald's a little pastry called a kolachki, which was very popular in Chicago. He thought, gee, I love kolachkis. The rest of the country must love kolachkis. So we tried to put those in McDonald's, and it failed.
But Kroc's most memorable flop was a sandwich developed after Cincinnati's Catholic population clamored for a meatless sandwich they could eat on Fridays. In response, he introduced the hula burger.
I said, well, we'll take a slice of pineapple, and incidentally, this is a great sandwich at home. Fix it up. You grill it in butter and put a slice of cheddar cheese on top, one on the bottom, and put it on toasted bun or bread. And they call it a hula burger. And they said, I like the hula, but where's the burger?
He thinks he has this great idea that he has his pulse on American Appetite. He doesn't. He has his pulse on the American Pocketbook, but he doesn't quite got the stomach down. So he learned very early on just to leave that to the franchisees.
Kroc's Cincinnati franchisee solved the meatless sandwich problem by developing the Filet-O-Fish. McDonald's now sells over 50 million pounds of fish per year. Jim Delegati in Pittsburgh developed the Big Mac, which went on to become McDonald's flagship sandwich. And Herb Peterson in Santa Barbara showed Ray a product that got McDonald's into the breakfast business.
It was all prepared for him, and we prepared some Eggs McMuffin for him, and he ate 2 of them. And he said, this is great, we should do it tomorrow.
Thanks to the Egg McMuffin, breakfast now accounts for more than 20% of McDonald's U.S. sales. Ray didn't care who got the credit, as long as the idea helped McDonald's. This was especially true when it came to advertising. Even though Ray was a super salesman, he knew it was best to leave the job of public pitchman to someone else.
Kroc was many things. He was brazen, he was arrogant, he was very determined, very dedicated, but he wasn't endearing. He wasn't this nice, warm father figure, grandfather figure that would pull in the families.
McDonald's understood that when it came to feeding families, kids had the loudest voice. In 1963, franchisees in Washington, D.C. hired the man who had played Bozo on local TV to develop a clown character exclusively for McDonald's. At first, they called him Donald McDonald.
Willard Scott, who was then very thin, by the way, Willard Scott was the first then Donald McDonald. And he had a McDonald cup for a nose, and he had a 4-hole carry-out tray for a hat, and he was dressed as a clown character in McDonald colors.
Here I am, kid. Hey, isn't watching TV fun? Especially when you got delicious McDonald's hamburgers.
The clown, soon renamed Ronald, was an instant hit with kids in the Washington, D.C. area. 3 years later, after a makeover and a wardrobe change, Ronald McDonald made his debut as the chain's national spokesman.
After McDonald's makes that decision, they go full force on this. They pull in the big advertising guns, have a media blitz, reach 4.6 million kids within a month, getting Ronald's face on all the networks. Big time exposure.
Hey, that's me. Pretty good likeness, wouldn't you say? When you see my face, think of your kind of place. McDonald's!
Ray knew that McDonald's image was crucial to its success and spared no expense using television commercials to position his company just the way he wanted.
The ads of McDonald's were always kind of warm and fuzzy, and I think that was a very conscious way of getting people not to think of McDonald's as the great assembly line food processor that it is. You deserve a break today. Well, isn't that nice? Thank you very much.
You deserve a break today at McDonald's.
Thanks to the power of advertising, McDonald's became an American icon. And it made sure everyone knew its formula.
Ah, I know it. Okay. 2 all-beef patties.
2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun.
Okay, 2 all-beef patties.
Special sauce, lettuce.
2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun.
2 all-beef patties, special sauce, and cheese.
That doesn't rhyme.
2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun.
By 1965, Kroc had opened close to 700 restaurants in 44 states. In April of that year, McDonald's became the first fast food company ever to go public. Stock was issued at $22.50 a share. Within weeks, it climbed to $49 a share, making Ray Kroc an instant multi-millionaire.
There was a lot of excitement at the offices because, no one was that sophisticated about the stock market, including Ray. Everybody would kid him when the stock did well, when it would go up some points, and somebody said, "Ray, you made $1 million today." And he used to laugh about it because he couldn't really conceive of anything of that nature.
3 years later, at a McDonald's convention, Kroc gave an after-dinner speech, telling his guests he had achieved everything he ever wanted in life except for one thing. For once, Kroc was not talking business. He was sending a message to the woman sitting next to him, the piano player from Minnesota whose husband was now a McDonald's operator, Joan Smith. After dinner, Kroc invited a select few guests, including Joan, up to his hotel room.
I was there in the suite. He brought in a grand piano so they could play the piano, and man, he was working. He wanted to get together. Oh, yes.
This time, Ray was triumphant. Within a year, he and Joan divorced their spouses, and on March 8, 1969, they were married. By the time Ray turned 70, he had everything he wanted in life. His business was more successful than he ever could have imagined, and he was happily married to Joan. But Ray couldn't sit still. Before long, America's king of the hamburger business set out to hit a home run in a whole new ball game. By the early 1970s, McDonald's officially became the largest food supplier in the country, surpassing even the U.S. Army in the number of meals served. Ray Kroc's success earned him a dinner invitation to Richard Nixon's White House. The president greeted Kroc by asking, "What is it, 8 or 9 billion now?" Kroc replied, "Mr. President, it's 12 billion." Such phenomenal success put Kroc in company with the world's richest men. But Ray soon learned that so much money and notoriety could also lead to trouble. In 1972, Kroc donated over $250,000 to Nixon's re-election campaign. The contribution drew enormous criticism. New Jersey Senator Harrison Williams accused Kroc of trying to influence a minimum wage bill in legislation at the time.
It was a disastrous type of mistake to make such a what turned out to be such a visible donation to that candidacy at that point in time.
Kroc had better luck with charity. In 1969, he started his own foundation for medical research and handed over the reins to his brother, Dr. Robert Kroc.
We chose 3 areas: diabetes, arthritis, and multiple sclerosis. The first 2 Ray had, and our sister Lorraine had been diagnosed with MS. And of course, I couldn't resist the opportunity to give someone else's money away for research.
Now in his 70s, Ray began to enjoy the spoils of his riches. He used his money to fulfill his lifelong dream of owning a baseball team. For years, he had tried to buy his favorite childhood team, the Chicago Cubs, but their owner, Phil Wrigley, wouldn't sell. Finally, in 1974, Ray bought the struggling San Diego Padres, who were about to be moved to Washington, D.C.
Buzzy Babese, who was then the president of the San Diego Padres, got a call from Kroc's attorney. And he said, "I have a man who wants to buy your ball club." And he said, "Well, how many in his group?" "Just one." He said, "How is he going to pay for it?" "Cash." And he's the guy that really was the savior of baseball in San Diego. And nobody knew who he was. We didn't know this was the man who created McDonald's. Here he comes in, little guy, kind of a feisty guy. And he said, "Well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to win around here."
Kroc brought his trademark enthusiasm to the game of baseball. But at the Padres' 1974 home opener, he got a little too enthusiastic.
We were behind another 8-0 or something in the 3rd inning, and Ray marched down to the PA, and he got on the microphone and apologized to the fans. "This is the worst team I've ever seen in my life. I don't want to apologize to you people. I promise we're going to win one of these days, and I think these people are awful on the field, and it'll never happen again." And he went on and on.
He gets up there, PA in hand, and berates those players like he was berating a crew worker. And the players are dumbfounded. Management at the Padres is dumbfounded. Kroc's friends are rolling their eyes. It's like, "Oh, there goes Ray Kroc." And it was classic Kroc.
I have been schooled in serving the public. And if they come into my ballpark, I don't own the ballpark, see my ball club, I want them to get value. And that's what I want them to get in McDonald's. And as long as I can give them value, I'm going to have them coming in. When I can't give them value, I'm going to have to berate somebody.
After that outburst, the fans loved him for it, for being just a normal person, but with $1 billion in his pocket.
Ray garnered more attention for his exploits with the Padres than he ever did with McDonald's. He tried desperately to turn the team around with little success. The Padres had only one winning season over the next 6 years. Kroc was frustrated and beginning to feel the effects of age. In his late 70s, Kroc scaled back his day-to-day involvement with the club, but still remained a favorite with the San Diego fans. On October 2nd, 1982, the Padres threw their owner a glorious 80th birthday party.
It was Ray's day. And at the beginning of the game, Ray drove around the entire stadium in an open convertible car, waving to everybody and loving every minute of it. It was really fantastic.
It was one of Ray's last shining moments. A year later, he suffered a series of debilitating strokes that would eventually confine him to the hospital. On January 14, 1984, Ray Kroc died of heart failure. He was 81. Ray left behind a fortune estimated at more than $500 million. 10 months later, McDonald's sold its 50 billionth burger. His widow, Joan, inherited the Padres and carried on the Kroc baseball tradition. During the 1984 season, the team wore Ray's initials on their sleeves as they went on to win the National League pennant.
Joan Kroc, the owner of the San Diego Padres.
Joan celebrated with the team after the momentous victory.
It is the happiest moment of my life, and I dedicate this happy moment of my life to Ray. May he rest in peace and be forever and ever happy. We love him.
Today, McDonald's success continues with no end in sight. The numbers are staggering. McDonald's is preparing to open its 25,000th unit. 1 of every 8 Americans has worked for McDonald's. And according to a recent survey, the Golden Arches are now more recognizable around the world than the Christian cross. McDonald's has truly reached epic proportions. All of it accomplished through the vision of Ray Kroc.
He is a giant in the food industry, equaling anything that anybody did anywhere else. Henry Ford, you can talk about him, you talk about the Wright brothers, the airplane business. This guy dominates what he got into.
I don't think the McDonald brothers ever dreamt of anything like this. I think they had a very good concept, and you have to tip your hat to them for that. But I think it was Ray's vision that really made McDonald's go.
Here you take this kid from not a wealthy background, a son of an immigrant, very much through pluck and luck, creates this multi-million-dollar corporation that's known worldwide. So by the standards of American capitalism, he's about as successful as you get.
Ray Kroc's widow, Joan, is listed by Forbes with a net worth of $2.5 billion, though she's slightly poorer today because she just recently gave $80 million to the Salvation Army, the largest donation that charity has ever received.